Seeing the presence of a quorum, I'm calling this meeting of the Amherst School Committee to order at 6:33 p.m. on September 17th, 2024. I'm Sarah Marshall. I'd like everyone else at the table to introduce themselves, please. Go ahead.
Deb Leonard.
Oop.
Jennifer Schau.
Dr. Z.
Thank you. I'm expecting one more school committee member, and there she is. All right, so our first order of business is public comment. There were no comments submitted by voicemail or by email. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak? Please come forward. State your name and your association with the district, and then you have 3 minutes. Let the record show Bridget Hines has joined. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Christopher Hockman. My association with the district is I have one student remaining in the high school at this point, previously two in the school system. Public comment, the only thing I was hoping to draw attention to, because it's a multi-year issue that I've observed, and the water fountains in the high school. If you have a chance, I would ask that as board members, each time you come to the meeting, try to use as many of them as you can in the high school while you're here. Take a look at them, take a look at the condition of them, see how many do function and see how many don't function. And remember that when you have an opportunity to review infrastructure and budgets and the like. Please, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to make a comment? No.
Sarah,
Oh,
I have a
yes.
point. I have 2 points of order.
Yes.
First, I'm concerned that the door is locked because that means that the public is locked out. So is there a way we can find a member of maintenance to facilities to unlock the door?
Or could we prop the door open? Is that allowed? Just put a book, the free books back there. Maybe you can use a free book. Thank you very much. Thanks
Thank you,
for,
Tanya.
yeah.
Tanya.
And while we're doing that, just
Yes.
secondly, might you want to explain that we're the Amherst School Committee, not the Regional School Committee?
I think
Just
I
in case
called the
the
Amherst
individual-
School Committee to order.
Oh, well, okay, just in case that individual wants to know that this committee oversees the elementary schools, and if you want to get a message to the regional school committee about the regional schools, you'll need to make that public comment at a regional school committee meeting.
All right, moving along to the chair's update, which was very brief and was attached to the agenda that I attended a virtual presentation about public comment. I just wonder if any of the other members here happen to be part of that. No, well, they have posted the recording and the slides if you would like to see that for yourself. Otherwise, I attended the first CPAC, the Special Education Parent Advisory Council meeting, and that's it. And for chair's update, there was one submitted by Deb Leonard, who is our representative on the Elementary School Building Committee. Is there anything more you want to say about the August meeting was canceled, you said?
Yeah, there was a request by the subcontractors to extend the deadline for the bid, which kind of moved everything, shifted everything a bit, but I believe all the bids are in. The last I knew, they were expecting bids on the 21st of August, and we'll be having a meeting on Friday, and we'll see where we stand. The sub bids came in on target.
Fabulous. So the August 21st was the moved deadline?
So there were several on, so the original deadline for the general contractor bids was the 14th of August.
Mm-hmm.
No, August, August. But then they extended the sub bids, which made the general contractor bids be due on the 21st, they thought, as of the email on the 14th. And I have nothing.
But all the deadlines have now passed. Is that your understanding?
To the extent that I have been updated, yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Do any other committee members have any update? Okay, all right, thank you. Superintendent, Dr. Z, do you have updates for us?
Yes. Mm-hmm. You gonna pull it up? You open? Okay. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. So again, keeping with the student-centered theme, it was a wonderful few weeks in Amherst with our wonderful elementary programs. And so I always like to remind everyone of the district priorities: student safety and well-being, healing and stabilization of the district, and data and accountability for equity. This evening, we're going to cover school updates from our 3 elementary schools and our early education center. We are working to make sure that our early education center has an identity of its own. It has life of its own, and so we want to make sure that we recognize the hard work that those educators and students are doing, as well as it's Hispanic Heritage Month. And we're going to talk about budget savings, budget process. So at Wildwood this in the past few weeks celebrated International Dot Day. It was a global celebration of creativity, courage, and collaboration. And so teacher Shea introduced it to his class through Peter Reynolds' book, The Dot. And in speaking with Miss Allison, Principal Allison, she explained that the book talked about a student who was asked to draw something, and what they did was they basically kept their pen or marker on the paper and created a dot. And it actually allows for our students to start to think about creativity, and from a dot, there's great things that happen. So as you can see, we were able to engage with the students that day. We were able to sit in, and students, staff, everyone alike had on their dots, but also there were some, what is it called? Fantasizers? Fascinators that were being worn. And so the energy was really great at Wildwood, and there's great things moving forward on that campus. Next, we have the Red Carpet Thursdays. So Fort River Elementary School, at the beginning of the school year, we rolled out the red carpet for all of our students that attended throughout the district. So whatever school or site, there were red carpets. And so Principal Tammy has now incorporated the red carpet, so where every Thursday our kids walking on red carpet Thursdays. And as you can see, they enjoy it, and they are very, very happy to come into school. So it's really about school engagement. Our early education center, it's all about agriculture and farming and gardening. And so, as you know, our youngest learners, we want to build their fine motor skills. We want to have them explore. And so they took some time to garden, and not just flowers, but also herbs alike. And so thank you to Miss Elizabeth and her dynamic team at the Early Education Center, because they continue to mold and shape our littlest learners. Crocker Farm Elementary. So Crocker Farm had, in the words of Principal Derek, a little bit of a tizzy. And so, as you know, we were experiencing issues with the fire alarm system. We transitioned them to a early dismissal. It was about an hour earlier, and then we had to close the after-school program. But the work was done, however, within the 5 days. However, we weren't able to do the final test on time. And so this coming Monday just passed, we did continue to work Fire Watch. We also worked in collaboration with Amherst Recreational to make sure that they were able to implement their after school and put the Fire Watch in place. So basically, the final stages are in. I think that Crocker Farm is going to be very pleased to continue the school year without continuous fire alarms going off. And I think I want to say thank you to the Amherst Fire Department, because they have been true unsung heroes and support during this time. Regardless of if it went off or not, they were present and they showed up. And so we are truly grateful. Principal Derek and the Crocker Farm family, I think they delivered cookies and some different sweets to Amherst Fire Department as a thank you. And so I am truly grateful to Chief Lindsay, Deputy Chief Olmsted, and Bascom for their hard work and dedication in supporting Crocker Farm and having us come back to full fruition. So we are on our regular schedule as of Monday, and maintenance continues to work and monitor the system. Hispanic Heritage Month. And so what we started on September 15th, it goes until October 15th. And what we've decided to do at the central office is engage others and highlight educators throughout the district, our Latinx educators who have made impact. On Friday, we highlighted Miss Stephanie, and so she was highlighted. And today's staff highlight is Dr. Marta Guevara, and Dr. Guevara has been a vital part of our school district since her hire in September of 1999. Her impact on the district is witnessed by the students and families she has taught and helped during that time. Over the years, Dr. Guevara has held various roles from Spanish teacher to assistant principal to student services administrator at the central office, and currently she's the director of student and family engagement. Her PhD is in educational leadership from UMass. Marta, as we all call her, is a tireless advocate for student and staff safety, and her commitment to the district's values shine through in everything she does. So she's known for her passion for seeing the whole child. Marta collaborates with staff to ensure every student is fully supported. I'd like to thank her for her unwavering dedication to students, families, and colleagues as she continues to make a lasting difference in our community. So thank you, thank you, thank you, Marta, for your relentless care, leadership, and advocacy. And what you'll see is every other day, we'll be highlighting in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, one of our Latinx educators. And so individuals within our school community were actually asked to submit suggestions and why. And so everyone was highlighted. So we are aiming to highlight every other day. So we started off with Miss Stephanie. Today is Marta. And then I believe tomorrow or Thursday, it'll go out. Thursday, it will go out. With our next highlight based on staff suggestion. So we are honoring our Hispanic educators in Hispanic Heritage Month. Our budget process. I'm making the budget process a standing conversation in all of my superintendent's updates because I think numbers at this point. So after identifying gaps in our central office, coming into this role, we looked at processes as well as different assessments of the areas. I've been continuously working with audits, looking at what we do, what does the data say, do we have data, do we not have data, what are some of the critical areas, and every day that I've sat in this role since July 1, things start to unfold. It's a new layer of the onion that peels back, and many days, just like an onion would do, I really do want to cry, but I don't. So there is restructuring that has taken place to better align responsibilities with our district goals, but particularly focusing on fiscal responsibility, and so ensuring that there are consolidation of roles to meet our needs and to help us function effectively and efficiently. The audits have uncovered issues that I feel should have been known and shared prior to me onboarding or in my onboarding. And so not having a full picture, it really creates delving into the status of the districts. And so what we're doing in terms of the FY26 budgets is looking at alignment of services, delving into specific numbers, looking at our personnel more in-depthly, looking at what are the critical costs, operational costs, what are they truly based on trends, and then projecting out. And so we have begun the audit of our payroll and budget processes, and that is in every district, so that work has begun. And I know that this may not be a Amherst only, but we do have a Four Towns meeting set for September 28th, and so I do want to say that publicly, that we are working in preparing, and I do know that this is one of the earliest years based on the budget office's timeline, and there that we have been able to finish our end of year budgets and balancing moving into, for example, FY24. And so we are working to definitely get our be fiscally responsible, but also in alignment with our fiscal transparency. And as always, I welcome community feedback. We do still have our community survey. I was playing soccer on that day with the kids. They were teaching me how to play soccer. I did not fall, but it was a really great morning. So I do ask for thoughts and for everyone to go ahead and complete the survey. And that's it for the superintendent's update.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the superintendent? Jennifer?
I can just go to the QR link myself, but like, what is the I haven't seen the survey yet, and is it going to be available ongoing? Like, what's being collected in the survey?
So the survey is a part of my entry plan. It's to collect data to see what are the glows and grows within the district. It's the opportunity to determine what we do well and from the community vantage point, but also what areas we need to improve upon. And again, as we work to heal, to stabilize, and to rebuild trust, we truly need to to have that data in what is it that the community or parents see that are areas that, yes, we do well, but also areas that we may fall short in making them feel like this is a home or educational setting for their children.
Thank you. And is it going to be available ongoing, or is it going to close at some point?
So this is based on the entry, so it is going to close, but we are going to do different levels of surveys throughout the year to start to garner information. So right now this is like overarching based on what we see and what we gather from this data. Then we'll see where else we need to go. I also would like to do pre and post. Like, this is what you said we weren't doing well. At a certain point, circle back around maybe this same time next year and say, hey, have you seen improvements and what does it look like? And start to compare that data as a metric for district improvement.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, as a parent, I got the survey, and I have to say, I really appreciated the types of questions that are being asked. I kind of, at some point in my career as an Amherst parent, I got a little bit of survey fatigue, and perhaps skip some of them. But this one encouraged me. It really made me want to contribute to it, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I have to thank our partners who helped us to develop the surveys because one of the key things is short and to the point. And the questions actually were created in a model that, like you said, engages parents and the community to give us a kind of full story.
Follow up? I mean, unrelated, but about the survey also. It's always an issue in a community to get the full range of participants in these things. I mean, there's so many decisions that perhaps were made with a handful of input from the people who did respond. And I wondered your thoughts on making sure you get a large number and also the full range of our community.
I think that with any sample size, it helps us to really determine on what we're looking for, and that's why the questions were critical. One of the key things that we're trying to engage as many individuals as possible is not only using Parent Square, but as you can tell at the end of each one of my updates, the surveys available is in the PDF. We're going to start to host some community events and parent meetings and kind of get it out that way as well. So trying to, within in a time frame, get as much response. It's hard, but we also know that we'll have to look and determine, it's never going to be the full voice, but we have to be very realistic when we get the feedback of whose voice and the percentage of voice that we've heard, and note that if we only get 10% of our teaching population, we can't say that the majority said, but we can say that there was a small population that felt like this was important. And maybe it doesn't drive every decision for us to jump gung-ho, but it helps us to reflect on there are individuals who feel like this certain thing is important.
I have a few questions, and I'll start with the survey. Is this survey also for educators and staff, or is it mostly for families? Or?
We have a staff survey that we sent out, and we
Oh.
repeatedly sent out to the staff directly. So this one is for community members and families, and then there's a specific staff survey.
Okay, thank you.
We do have one for students, but we haven't rolled that one out yet. That we're going to kind of hit towards the region, especially so that we can kind of work with our high schoolers and middle schoolers to get their input in restructuring.
Okay. A question about the Crocker Farm fire alarm business. Should I assume that 2 weeks ago or whenever the alarm was constantly sounding, you had to evacuate the school every time?
Yes.
Highly disruptive.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And I gather the school is back in session for the full day, but you're having a fire watch because the alarm isn't ready? What does that mean? Are there fire department personnel on?
So what occurred was that Friday evening into the weekend, the fire department has to test this alarm system and ensure that it is fully functional. We were unable to have that test scheduled by Friday close of day, and so what we did was we continued to run the fire watch this week.
But what is that? What
So
is a
that's
fire
just
watch?
so fire watch is where there are actual individuals who are trained by the fire department to identify signals that there may be a fire in certain areas that are not heavily populated. So they are, so for example, our principal, assistant principal, there were individuals from maintenance who were all trained to look for any signal that there may be a fire because there would be no fire alert system. And
Got
so
it.
that's what that was.
Thank you. A question about Hispanic Heritage Month. It's wonderful that you're highlighting educators and staff. But do you know if curriculum is highlighting Hispanic heritage in any of the grades or in any of the classes, or the buildings as a whole are doing their own student-focused celebrations? Or?
So every building is doing something different. For example, as you know, I'm in a middle school, so today there was like a fun fact about Hispanic Heritage Month that the students presented over the intercom. Different schools are having different activities, and different teachers are doing different things in their classrooms. As we go through the curriculum audit, one of the key things that we'll look when we talk about equity and diversity is how do we incorporate the different aspects of national celebrations within what we're doing in the classrooms.
Great, thank you. And I just want to say to the public, because your slide mentioned the Four Towns meeting, that relates to the regional school budget, not the elementary school budget. So if people haven't heard of that before. Any other questions for the superintendent? Bridget?
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back on the budget again, especially about like the fiscal 25 update. You said you've done some consolidating. We're still not sure. Is that on the agenda somewhere? Or
Fiscal 26, not 25. So for fiscal 26.
the budget that we passed for fiscal year 25, right? So I know that the state money that came in was a bit over in some categories.
Oh, we
a
have
bit
that on. We
under.
have that to talk about
Okay,
tonight
that's
in
perfect.
terms of
Excellent.
fiscal 25.
Thank you.
And
Perfect.
what we're going to speak about in that, and then in terms of how it affects fiscal 26 and some of the moves we're making to plan ahead.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
So the alarm system, the fire system will be tested this weekend.
No, it was tested
It was tested.
this week. Yesterday, thank you. It was tested yesterday, so we're
and
good.
it's-
Yes.
Great. Wonderful. All right, thank you for that report. Next, minutes. So I posted draft minutes of our meeting of August 20th. I know some of you were not here, but I'm hoping you'll call out any mistakes, and I'll take any corrections. I guess I had a blank spot in at the end of the superintendent's update when I didn't know the name of the guest speaker, but NIBE provided that. That was Robert Peters. Thank you. Any other corrections? Did everybody have a chance to read them? Yes, Jennifer?
I move we approve the minutes of August 22nd. Sorry, I move we approve the minutes from the meeting on August 20th.
Thank you. I will second. Any other? Jennifer,
I
you
just
have
have
a-
a
yeah.
thought that if we follow the tradition that those who didn't attend the meeting abstain, we might not pass these minutes tonight.
Right, but that really is it may be a tradition, but there's nothing in either, Robert's rules or our policy that requires that, so I'm hoping someone will vote for them. So, all those in favor of accepting the minutes of August 20th with that one correction, please? 3, and you're going to abstain? Okay. Thank you. I'll get those posted. We're going to delay the warrant report to the end of the meeting because there are many, many warrants, and maybe not everybody wants to wait around for that. I don't know if there are gifts also. I didn't see any posted. So, okay, probably no gifts. All right, then to our first item of new business. It continues a discussion we started on August 20th. And just to recap, a woman who's interested in starting a private elementary school in Amherst reached out to find out what the process is. Turns out we have a statutory obligation, but we don't have a process. And at the August meeting, the committee directed me and the vice chair, Irv Rhodes, to develop, or in any case, come back with a process that was more detailed than just dropping the whole thing on the lap of the superintendent, who is indeed very busy, I understand. So I have attached several documents to board docs. One of them is Amherst School Committee Policy, LBC, draft process, all right? So we already have in our policy manual a policy LBC that applies to the region and Pelham and Amherst. But as Jennifer pointed out last time, it is entirely and only the responsibility of the Amherst School Committee to approve or not approve any request for a school for any grade, K to 12, in Amherst. So that means this body can establish its own policy. So, excuse me, what I discovered, and I wish I had known last month, is that the Mass Association of School Committees has a draft policy, and I've attached that to board docs. It's certainly more detailed than what we had, but I looked through many of the policies of other towns and found the Wellesley policy, which I've also attached, is clearly based on the MASC policy, but more detailed. And in particular, what it adds is those factors listed by the state's Department of Education, DESE, in its guidance from 2007. So the MASC draft policy just sort of referred to, go through, give the applicant the checklist. But it was entirely unclear what was meant by checklist. Well, so I asked MASC, and what is meant by the checklist is that list of factors in the DOE advisory. So those were pulled into Wellesley's policy. And so what I've done for Amherst is basically to take that Wellesley policy and, excuse me, obviously change the name of the town, but then highlighted in color, if you're looking at it on the screen, language that I would suggest we change, but I'm completely open to suggestion. For example, item 1, the private school applies in writing for approval. The Wellesley policy says 1 year in advance. I don't know, that's a long time. How about at least 6 months? So green is what I am suggesting, and so that would modify the Wellesley policy. So there are only a few such suggestions. I have not run this by our attorney. You know, I want to hear the committee's and the superintendent's feedback before I do that, but we do, I mean, we do have an interested party who wants to know what our what our process and is, and I think if we're going to settle on a process for this applicant, we might as well make that the policy in case someone else comes forward. So, open for questions or comments. Jennifer.
So I am still very not uninterested in having the superintendent have any formal or policy responsibility in this process. This process is not the superintendent's job or purview or responsibility. It is completely the school committee's job, our purview, and our responsibility. And, you know, possibly if we were in a position where we had a long-time superintendent and didn't have a budget crisis and needing to rebuild trust and rebuild community, possibly I would be okay with delegating the school committee delegating this to the superintendent. I still wouldn't want it to be in the policy, but I still would think that it's something we could do if the school committee felt comfortable doing that. But anyway, we're not in that situation. We have a new superintendent. We have a lot going on in our district. Approving a private school doesn't benefit our districts at all. And the work of the superintendent and the work of the central office to do this would take away from work that needs to be done in our districts. So I can't approve this draft the way it is, regardless of the timing. I'm okay with the checklist and the criteria, but for the procedure steps, I would want to replace superintendent with the school committee or the school committee chair in all of those things. So the letter of application is sent to the school committee or their designee. I mean, I think we can leave room for ourselves to designate someone and have that be broad and have the committee decide who to designate that, who the designee would be. And perhaps in some future year, we might designate the superintendent, but I wouldn't want to put that in the policy. So I want this is, you know, Mass General Law says that this is our responsibility, not the superintendent's responsibility, and I don't want the superintendent to have to take any of this on. Certainly not this year, possibly in future years, but I don't think the superintendent should be named in the policy or the title named in the policy. And I think that this needs to be a school committee responsibility. I heard you say last time, Sarah, that you don't think that we are qualified to do this, to approve a curriculum. But the Commonwealth of Massachusetts doesn't care that we don't think we're qualified. They give that job to us, the school committee. We do have a school committee member, Mr. Rhodes, who is a former public school teacher and public school administrator. Maybe if Irv were here, I would be asking him if he thinks he would be interested in being the point person to, maybe with him and one other person, to like review the curriculum and be the point person for all this, and then make a suggestion to the committee. But I'm still firmly on, I don't want the superintendent to be formally or procedurally or in the process involved in this right now.
Bridget?
Thank you. So yeah, when I read over the draft minutes, I also noticed what Irv and Jennifer had both said at the last meeting about not burdening the superintendent further, you know, especially at this new point in her role. But in general, I think we've hired her to benefit our students, right? So I agree with Jennifer on that. I was thinking maybe 2 school committee delegates, and I'm not so worried about professionalism. I mean, you taught schools, Sarah. Deb works in schools. I work in schools. Jen's in higher ed. Irv's taught as well. Like, people don't come to school committee usually blind to what the elements of a good education are, so I'm not as concerned about that. There were a couple little details that felt like would be important in the draft to me. One is something regarding traffic safety around the school area. like that
I'm
we.
saying, sorry, that's something you would add, or that's
Yeah.
something here? Oh.
No, I would like to see that added. And then the second thing that I think is that we should have something specifically stating that the school has policies and procedures to support students with disabilities.
I don't think we can require that because a private school doesn't have to accept.
Under ADA, they can't turn someone away based on their, like there would be legal, that they have non-discriminatory. I'm sure that there's a legal way, and I'll do some more research. It just popped into my mind now, but I
Yeah.
think that legally, we want to hold them to the highest standard of inclusion that we can legally do.
Right,
both
it's my
because of the-
understanding that if, and maybe they do have to take students with disabilities, but that process is managed by DESE, that side of it. Because it's I think,
DESE
federal law.
doesn't manage private schools.
no, the review of what they would do for students with disabilities.
Okay, I wouldn't want to leave that out. I wouldn't vote if we didn't have some way to include a piece like that.
Hold on, just making notes. And obviously, Irv is not here, so I'm a little hesitant to speak but for him. But he and I met about this because you asked us to, and he is completely on board with this and agrees with me that, or agrees that this is an appropriate policy. I think his concern was not leaving it to the superintendent to figure out what the process is going to be and to design the process, not that the superintendent wouldn't be involved in the review. So I'm confident that, I mean, unless he's changed his mind, he is supports this draft policy, but that's all I'll say about his point of view. Yes, Dr. Z.
I want to comment on the timeline. I think 6 months is unrealistic. I think that to do a clear and honest review, it needs to be submitted at least a year in advance. And the reason being is that it gives the committee, as well as anyone else who is reviewing the different aspects, the time to go back at it, like giving them the timeline of opening. So if they plan to open in August of 2027, starting in August of 2026 of the application process, submitting it, the back and forth, that's critical. I also think that having I see that it says the site plant equipment adequately support the program and are operated to ensure the safety and health of the students.
I'm sorry, can you just refer me to the?
Page 2, and B is physical plant safety, and it's B.
Yes, thank you.
The one thing that I don't see that is not being requested, and maybe I missed it, is a layout, a suggested layout of what, for example, the building layout, or to make sure that they're in compliance. Having a fire inspection, safety inspection, but just making sure there is like a building layout. Something in the time that we're living in right now that the committee should consider is a possible crisis management plan. We understand where we are in terms of the issues that we're facing, the crisis and trauma that we're facing nationwide. And so one of the things, just to make sure that there is emergency management and a crisis management plan in place for the school.
Crisis, sort of broadly defined, like it could be a national or a local event that's impacting the school, or something in the school community.
Right.
And
What is their plan for fire? What is their plan, active shooter, trauma? Just making sure that they have in their brain, they've started to frame what they would do in any frame of a crisis management plan. So as a public school, we have one, which we're working with our community partners to update. So again, making sure that we're aware that the most recent practices and trainings are in play.
Deb?
So, all the attachments are useful. One of the things that Wellesley, didn't include that MASC, suggested or had in their sample, policy is a presentation to the school committee, and then a formal action based on the recommendation of whoever is reviewing it. It's clearly not going to be the superintendent. But those two things were in MASC that I didn't see.
Sorry, what was the second one? The
A
presentation?
formal action based on the recommendation. So there's, I'm just following the steps. So it goes from 5 to 6. Upon successful review by the,
Right.
a recommendation for approval is presented to the committee. And then the committee is and then the private school is notified of
Right,
the
so-
decision. But MASC actually says that the school committee takes formal action on the recommendation. That was just, I don't see why we wouldn't put that in there. And I think the presentation makes sense. I wouldn't die on that hill, but I don't see why it wouldn't, and it provides the context for the encapsulating information to be read into the public record. So I would encourage that. I had a couple tweaks on things like the private school submits a completed application, but we didn't say there was an application. We just said that there was a checklist and applies in writing. I guess that's what you mean by, that is meant by application. I know, but I'm not sure what the application involves. There's a letter for requesting approval, and then we give them a checklist criterion.
Well, it says the private school application shall include, right under criteria.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then there are things like, I'm certainly not gonna be comfortable with 6 months when private schools could be out of session for a good chunk of that time, or our.
Say that again? What?
So, in advance submitted for approval, not private schools, we could be out of session for a good chunk of 6 months. I don't see us being able to commit to turning around an application within a 6-month period if that
I
includes.
agree, and this only
summer.
says what the private school, what puts a demand on them, not on us. It doesn't say, nowhere in here does it say how long the school committee, or how long the review process might take. Or the school committee shall make a decision within X. It's just have to give at least some block of time,
So,
which we determine,
and I think that block of time should be a year,
at least,
at least a year.
Okay.
In advance of planned opening. And yes, I think we hadn't discussed our turnaround time, so I think it would make sense to indicate that we can't leave a school hanging for as long as we choose. So I wonder if we would include that in any kind of policy. I would, just looking for alignment, because reading this teeny tiny writing from Desi, it seems like our responsibility is to make sure that the education provided by the public school, the private school, should we approve it, has to kind of align with the sort of standards we require for our own students. Because they talk about standards for approval of private schools. There's procedures, other agency approvals, records and materials the school's required to maintain, the criteria for managing thoroughness and efficiency, as well as the standard for private school approval. And I see an outline of the things they're supposed to provide, but I don't understand how, given this checklist, we're then supposed to be able to determine whether or not in these areas there is a thoroughness and an efficiency. I guess
Effectiveness.
efficiency. Efficiency. I don't know.
I will check.
I'm just following what Desi says. And then back to what I think you and Bridget were going back and forth on. I think we can, and this would be a question for Mark Terry, I think we can require whatever we want of the private school as long as we consistently apply it to all private schools within our jurisdiction. So I don't know if that means existing private schools, whatever has been applied to them, we need to apply consistently. If we create a new set of policies and procedures, what does that mean for the two elementary private schools in our jurisdiction?
I think those are lost. Those two schools that I'm thinking of have been around for at least 50 years. So I don't think we have any way of knowing.
I'm just, well, if we're going to start applying policies and procedures to a new private school, we have to at least verify what policies and procedures were provided. Okay, we don't. I would ask Mark, but I'm not going to die in that hill either. The last thing I would say is then the kinds of things that we need, I think, to provide for these students in our jurisdiction is the same kinds of policies that we have. So the ones that we've been reviewing recently, I would expect them to have a Title IX policy on the books.
We're not their lawyers. So,
I think,
we
the way I read it, it is our responsibility, but, to make sure that the kinds of protections provided for our public school students are in place for the private school students as well. Maybe I'm misinterpreting the document.
All right, let me say a couple things. First of all, to Bridget, I think I was misunderstanding you. A private school evidently does not have to have a special education program. That's what I meant. Yes, accommodating students with physical disabilities. What the distinction is, disabilities and requiring special education, I'm not sure. But so I want to still push back on, I understand Dr. Z and her staff are very busy. But the Commonwealth, it's our obligation to the students in our district to provide them an adequate education as that is defined in curricular and other terms by the state. But we don't do it ourselves. We don't design that curriculum ourselves. We don't even really assess what we're doing to see if it meets all those objectives, curricular objectives. We hire people to do that because they are expert. And I feel that, I'm imagining Amherst children who might go to this private school. I wish they would come to our public school, but for whatever reason, if they want to go to a private school, I feel we have a duty to them to make sure that the education they're going to get is comparable to what they would get here, because they need basically our permission to not enroll in our public schools. So I think that the education a private school is going to provide should be reviewed as thoroughly as what a public school is providing. And we don't I don't think we do that for our public schools. We hire professionals. And if I were charged with making the determination about a private school curriculum, I would be on the phone to the staff to get information from them. So I'm not sure that it would be all that much of a time saver. It might be a whole lot less efficient use of everybody's time. So, Jennifer.
I have a few just other comments I want to make. First, I appreciate you showing us the MASC reference policy. MASC writes these reference policies as suggestions, but MASC is not infallible. And I know from my experience on the policy subcommittee that sometimes MASC's reference policies don't make any sense or are outdated. This one says it was from 2020, was reviewed in 2022, but they're it's not. We don't necessarily have to go with what their reference policy is, but it's nice that they have examples. So yes, I agree with you, Sarah. We have a duty to the public. We have that duty, not the superintendent. So I'm again saying that it's our responsibility. We can fulfill that responsibility however we want, or however we think is best. I think it's best to not involve the superintendent at this time, or the central office. We need to figure out if we want to do what's right for our constituents and our public. We need to figure out a way to do that. I don't want to see the superintendent named in the superintendent's title named in the policy. That being said, I do think we need a timeline in the policy for our response time. So, because I'm in agreement that it needs to be at least 1 year for the school to apply. 6 months is way too short. But assuming a school is going to open in September, let's say the school wants to open in September of 26, so they would need to apply by September of 25. But then how long would it take on our end, however we do it, how long would it take us to give them an answer? They probably want as much time as possible to get the official go-ahead and then start recruiting students, et cetera. So I would think they would want an answer within 6 months, say. So I think it makes sense for us to say, apply a year before you want to open, and we'll give you an answer in 6 months. As outside figures. All that being said, I'm being realistic and thinking about the election schedule and cycle in our town. So let's say the school wanted to open in September 26, they apply in September 25. We're going to have an election in November of 2025. It's entirely possible the entire committee could turn over. So, those new school committee members would be seated January of 26. So do we want to make it apply 18 months ahead of time, and we'll give you an answer within 6 months or 6 months or more before your desired open date, something like that. And just my last bit of input is for the chair, which is that you showed us this policy and asked us for our input, and we're giving you our input. And I'm hoping that you'll take our input and consider it and research it, even if you think at this time that, even if you disagree or think at this time that it's not relevant or that we're mistaken about something. We're giving you our input, so thanks.
I have
Yes.
a question.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look up quickly. I'm not going to wade into should the superintendent do it or not. Just in terms of the students in our district who attend and the students that we get foundation budget money from this Chapter 70 money from the state, do we know if we get foundation money for students who choose to apply to private schools, or is that not?
It's based on enrollment.
It's
yeah.
based on the enroll. Our foundation enrollment is somewhat based on our.
Our student.
Okay, well, I've had a hard time getting those numbers to add up then. So then I will wade in and say that we do not have the financial resources to assess students who aren't going to attend our school district. So the paid members of our school, staff should not be asked to do that. I think it is our responsibility.
I'd like to ask Dr. Z if she has any idea how big a job this would be for staff. I mean, like, yeah, of course, we don't know if it's a K to 6 school or it's 4 to 7 or what, but I mean, do you have any comment on the degree of time commitment that something like this might take?
So it would depend on what we're checking off. So first of all, it would take us looking at a physical plant. Once fire safety, they review and they inspect and they give their overarching thumbs up. That's really a tell-all.
You mean like the fire department?
Right. Once they do their fire inspection, safety inspection, they give like a clearance, a permit to go through. Making sure that it's compliance. I wouldn't, because that's not my forte, so I would depend on like my facilities director to kind of look over and make sure that what they're stating would be in compliance. In terms of the curriculum, what we would be looking at is to determine age appropriateness. When it comes to private schools, parochial schools, we really can't tell them what to teach, what standards to teach. We would just be kind of similar to what we do when it comes to homeschool, making sure that it's age appropriate, it's within alignment with DESE standards. So it would all depend on the amount of grade levels, the school that would be required to be open, and then like very similarly to the homeschool standard, which is what we do right now, review that to make sure that it's appropriate. School staff, again, they're asking for qualifications, so looking over that. To give an estimate of time, it'll take some time to review. And it'll take time for like the query and everything else to come back to make sure that there's nothing that individuals can't or can, that doesn't come up as a red flag. I know that currently, since taking the role, one of the things is that if there's a red flag that comes in on a query within the district, I have to approve anyone working within the district to continue to work within the schools in the district. I think that it's going to require work. But again, for me, I'm student-centered, so if it's for children, I would want the best for any child. I would want them to come to our public schools, but I would want the best for any child. I think that one of the critical things that I would like the committee to look through the lens of is how would this function regardless of who's in the seat? Regardless of who's in a committee seat or regardless of who's in a superintendent seat, what is the best possible process to benefit the children of Amherst? Is it that the committee members make the decision? Is it that you write it that the committee members with consultation, if they come and they do a presentation at a committee meeting, I'm seated here, superintendent is seated here because they have to be here anyway. So it provides that. Is there a review? Is there a recommendation? For me, my suggestion would be, do not think of the person. Think of what is the best possible process for the children of Amherst.
Any more comments before we move on?
Yes, two very quick things. One is just to go back to the point about policies regarding non-discrimination or students with disabilities. I just say that the language says that the studies need to include thoroughness and efficiency of the studies, and that, you know, all the available research says that those conditions are the baseline for academics being thorough and efficient, you know, today. So it feels to me like we have to at least ask them to share the policies regarding non-discrimination and their plan for supporting students with disabilities if, you know, if admitted. Not every student would be admitted, you know, but under those conditions. And then the last thing was just, I was thinking about our process a little bit. And there's certain times a year where our agendas are really, really booked, and other times where they're a little lighter. And I was wondering, you know, if we put a date like, as an example, to have this submitted on June 15th and would be turned, you know, to be approved within 90 days or within 120 days or something like that, or even 6 months, like Jennifer said. But to think of not, what we don't want to do is get, several or even one application in September and think of I think of the track with the regional and how many meetings it was getting passed through in March or April, and even our budget. So I think if we could think as a committee about our workload and what times are lesser in terms of the dates that we write in as a process, it could be helpful.
Yes, our workload is an issue, but this work wouldn't happen in the committee, I don't think. I mean, not in public meetings.
I guess
I mean-
it depends how we
I mean, if we-
formulate the
yeah,
policy.
I mean-
Yeah. I thought it seemed like, I think that's still an up in the air question, but it seemed like there was a consensus developing more to have the superintendent not as involved and to have us more involved.
Right,
so.
that doesn't. That would be a problem for us, I think, if we had to do it in open, time-wise, if we had to be doing it in open session. But Deb?
How about at the time the policy is submitted,
The application.
the application, within the next month, the committee makes, or within the next 2 school committee meetings, the committee makes a decision about the timeline in which it would give its decision to the applicant. That allows there to be flexibility in real time based on the agenda, and that's it.
Dr. Z?
I would suggest that you do a backwards model and you start with application submittal time. How long would that take for the committee to review? Then say first presentation, how long that would take for the committee to give feedback in the presentation. Honestly, is sitting down and saying, if they submit this a year and ahead, put 12 months and span that out and see what realistically would be a realistic timeline. Worst case scenario, best case scenario. If it is the intent to have 6 months as suggested, what would it take for you to have 6 months? And do 2 timelines. I think that Bridget's concern around time of year is valid, where if you say if it's around the time when you're voting for budgets and we're in budget season, then this would not be precedent. Or if it's 1 month, a meeting a month, maybe we're meeting to say, hey, we have this presentation next 2 months. So my suggestion would be to outline the process as a committee. I know that someone has inquired, but the one thing you do not want to do is rush the process and put something in place that now you have to turn around and change. That's my suggestion. So my suggestion to the committee is you have what you suggest the processes to be in terms of what the application would be. Take that and look at it and say, how long would it take me, even if the superintendent is not doing it, but how long would it take the committee to review even the recommendation? If the superintendent was to do it, what would that take? If the committee needs to meet to do it, what would that take? Is it in open session? Is it in not? Really sit down and hash it out with a clear timeline. And once you have that timeline, I think then I would be able to critically say, because really, I think we spent around 30 minutes right now just discussing the policy.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what's going to happen when you have to go through the full, the application. And so would that application then require just a committee meeting just for the application to be approved?
Let's make this the last thing, because yes, we need to move on and we'll consider this further.
Sorry. So I appreciate your input, Dr. Z. I have a suggestion about the policy, which is, and I also appreciate your suggestion about thinking about who, not the specific individuals who are in these seats. So I've become a big fan of subcommittees. I mean, a subcommittee's job is to do the work and the research and the legwork, not make decisions, but then make recommendations to the full committee. So my suggestion is that the policy would be something like, we would charter a subcommittee that included 2 school committee members, and that we say in the policy, the subcommittee can include non-school committee members. So it could be the superintendent, it could be a volunteer from the community who has the appropriate experience, and that subcommittees can be much more agile. They can meet more frequently. They can do all the legwork and all that stuff, and then make a recommendation to the school committee, or report back to the school committee regularly. So that's my suggestion, is to rewrite this to charter a subcommittee to do all that and make a recommendation to the full committee.
All right, okay, thank you. A lot of good suggestions and feedback. I would also probably like to speak with our attorney just to see if he has any concerns about whether, if essentially we did the work ourselves or largely ourselves, if that would, anyway, just see what he says about that, because I do not see that, I didn't find any other school district in Massachusetts that approaches the issue this way. So, all right, thank you. Next, committee self-assessment and goals. We still don't have our full committee here to discuss this, but I would like to have a look. So if we can bring up the document. Nibby, can you show it? Thank you. So the beginning of this memo will sound familiar. I asked Sarah Bess from the region if I could plagiarize her summary, and she said yes. So I've modified it to be specific, of course, for the Amherst School Committee. There were only 3 of us there, Bridget, Irv, and myself. So I hope you've had a chance to look at the comments that were submitted relating to these aspects of committee self-assessment, such as how are we doing communicating with the public, or our relationship with the superintendent. And then I also added Jennifer's, the comments that she had sent in earlier. So does anyone have anything to add, or they want to highlight, or strikes them as interesting, or something that they would like to focus on for the year ahead? I will say, with respect to policy development, one of the comments is we need to have that should be active policy committee. Well, we've learned that we are our own policy committee. And now, of course, we have the joint policy committee with the region and Pelham. So I think that provides us a good pathway for, modifying any policies we might want to address. So. Jennifer, you had a suggestion about the meetings, taking comments in meetings. You noted that Sarah Bess puts names down. This is such a small group. I just go down the line and go back and go down the line. Does that seem all right? They're only... Well, I would suggest, in my dipping into the policy handbook, I have seen policies that were not updated to reflect just our new charter, like things about when we take office, and so we could have as a project reviewing some of our own policies, and if we need to take changes up to the joint committee, we can do that. So, Deb?
I think MASC, who are not infallible, has a program in which they do review your policies and make suggestions for updates. So if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to do all of our standing policies, it's perhaps beneficial to let them take a first pass at it. No?
Well, it's just a lot of policies. It's a lot of policies.
That's
We
why I'm
might-
saying
We could all just maybe, before our next meeting, spend some time looking at the policy handbook. We could focus as a group on reviewing one section, like the instructional policies around instruction or curriculum. Or we can just deal with policy concerns as they arise. So. Bridget, you have? Because I know that was a concern of yours.
Yeah, no, I think that, just looking at the policies, some of them seem to be like a little more outdated, et cetera, so, looking at them, but if I were gonna start, I think in line with what I was thinking about, that educational leadership piece, that we could start with ones related more to education or the curriculum or those pieces, especially at the elementary. I mean, that's sort of the heart and soul of
That's
things.
why we're here.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And then there was one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is just communication with the public. I think, obviously that's our sacred trust as members of the school committee. We're elected here by the public. And even though the meetings are a main way people can view, some of our meetings, unless there's something spicy going on, is like 5 views, 6 views, right? We have 1 or 2 members of the public. And so I'm just thinking if there are ways to add to the superintendent's newsletter or to one of the different places, like the school committee meeting tonight, this is on the agenda, and that or in the elementary newsletters or something like that, so people know. Because I think that one thing that can happen is that people hear about things after the fact and are upset instead of hearing about them while we're making the decisions. And the better our communication is with the public, better we are in that.
Well, Dr. Z.
I don't mind adding the dates to the family forum. I think we added specific dates that around what's happening in the district in the most recent one. It is going out bi-weekly, but I think that we can add that to the forum in terms of what's coming up for the month. So that's fine. And just put all of the committee dates on there. That's fine.
Thank you.
That'd be great. All right. I've also wondered whether the public, anyone, would find it useful if we, let's say, either in an update from the superintendent, or we could give to the PGOs, like links to our minutes or videos. Just make it. And if no one objects, I'm happy to do that myself.
I think the videos are probably better than the minutes in a way, because it gives the fuller context.
Deb?
Yeah, so a website that has up-to-date information instead of having agendas and items in board docs. And what was the answer? Sorry, I still feel like I have COVID brain. There's a second one, but can I take a second?
If it occurs to you. But I want to move on unless someone has anything else to add. So if it comes to you, just let me know and we'll come back. But I want to ask, Nabi, or is the staff available now to speak to the budget? Are they online or whatever? Oh, okay. Super. Then we'll close this discussion for the moment and move on to FY25 budget update. Go ahead, quickly.
Tewksbury has an annual agenda, and I think it would be, and that's sort of one way of making, there's some things that are routinized. And if we had a one-page annual agenda where people knew what to expect, that could help with some of the communication issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the FY budget update, I asked Dr. Z if this could be provided, specifically addressing comments made by a member of the public, I think at our previous meeting, about additional money coming from, more than had been anticipated in the budget, and, things we could do with that extra money. And I wanted to find out first whether that person's take on the situation is accurate or not, or really getting money, or what. So I will ask Dr. Z to take over now.
Sure, and Shannon will join in on it. So in essence, Sarah, thank you for providing clarity. And what we researched and found was that the final Chapter 70 receipts provided an additional $72,816 positive variance in the town's budget. But Chapter 70 is one line item out of thousands in the town's $97 million budget. So we do have a link that we will share in terms of the town's FY25 budget. Those funds were not specifically line item for the schools. And so what we have looked at in analyzing the FY25, what the town appropriated, a 4% increase over FY24, the town may or may not have negative variances in other departmental budgets that they appropriated the additional $72,000 to them. So the $72,000 isn't specifically on the cherry sheet, isn't specifically for schools. It is for the town of Amherst.
Right.
And so what we have looked at in terms of a more collaborative approach, as we close out FY25, we have determined that, not 25, FY24, we've determined that in actuality, focusing in on approaching the town for FY25 and asking for that variance would actually not support us in our, would be better supported if we look at how we can plan for FY26. And so our focus really is in fiscal year 26, and ensuring that any additional funds that we may need, we can actually draw from school choice if we have any minor deficit, because that goes into a revolving fund. However, in meeting with the team, what we determined was, in honesty, leaving FY25, not approaching the town for that additional support in terms of the $72,000, because there are additional line item budgets I was unable to have my monthly meeting with Paul this week because of a death of a staff member at the on the region side. And so, but in meeting with the team, the $72,000 really, in terms of asking for any increase on FY25 at this point, would not be prudent. What we are focused in on is planning for FY26.
Thank you. Is Shannon going to
Go
make a
into
presentation? Or
Yes,
or
I
so-
just wanted
okay.
to, okay.
Background. Thank you.
Shannon, you could go ahead and open up for the FY24 quarter 4 update. Can you test your audio, Shannon? Can you speak so I can hear you? Hold on, I need doing something.
Can you test your audio, Shannon? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
A bit.
Okay, Shannon, we can hear you.
Okay, Shannon, we can hear you. Okay. There might be a delay because I can't hear you, but I hear you on the YouTube video on my phone. So that's why I'm listening in, just in case there is a delay to ask something and I'm stone faced for a minute. special education line being high is due to the need for specific student services, along with contracted out services for vacant or leave of absence employees that are out on leave of absences. The facility uh, tracked over as a result of unfilled trade positions and inflationary pressure on custodial supplies, and of course the trash removal that we've talked about previously. The transportation was higher, mainly due to some additional vehicle maintenance that had to be completed. We did know the program and development line, that was not tracking as a concern in Q3, but in Q4 we did see that
Shannon?
higher, and part of that is related to a new K to 3 dyslexia screener that we had to purchase that had to meet DESI and, oh, I heard you, but I had to pause.
Shannon, can you turn, because we're getting a feedback from your phone, can you hear me better this way?
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. Sorry, I didn't realize you heard the phone as well.
Okay, that's fine. Okay,
It
go,
heard my
go
phone
ahead.
too. Okay, so what I was saying before is that the program development line, we didn't see that as an issue in Q3, but now we do see that it came out higher in Q4, and I went back and looked at those account lines to see what were those costs. So I identified that we had a new K to 3 dyslexia screener that we had to purchase, which was it had to meet DESI and Massachusetts guidelines. So that was on those lines. And we also had some curriculum services and supplies around the new iReady Math program that was not supported by the HQIM grant that we received. So those are the main expenses that increased that line, and it's highlighted in yellow. We did transfer funds from expenses to salaries that was previously approved by the school committee. The part of the increase in salaries that we see was a higher cost in translations, uh, salaries, the special education van monitoring, and the need for substitutes at a larger rate to cover staff's absenteeism and leave of absences when we have to cover staff that are out for longer term. Um, all in all, though, I'm very satisfied with how the quarter report came out. We are under budget, and we're in good shape for 24. And I'd also just like to add our end of year report for FY 24 in Amherst has been completed as well.
Great. Thank you. So some,
Now we can't hear anything.
what?
You're
She
back,
can't-
you're good now, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I think some committee members have questions. Jennifer?
Thanks, Shannon. So just so I'm reading this report correctly, the available budget column is the difference between the fiscal 24 expenses column and the revised budget column?
Yes.
So the available budget column is sort of like the over-under.
Yes.
Okay, so if I glance at that column, I see a big overspend in special ed, which you talked about, and then, and facilities, which you talked about. There's like an underspend on utilities, and I don't, did you talk about that? Like why is utilities, there was an
No,
underspend?
but I certainly can. So there's a large underspend by utilities. So that had to do with we had budgeted a certain amount of funds as ESSER in the 24 budget, and it was a clean pickup and move on to ESSER to take it from utilities. So that's why it looks wonky. It's because that's what we moved on to ESSER, and why there's more available in utilities, why it was down so low. It wasn't actually down. It was probably more, I don't know what the number was off the top of my head, but it was probably more in line with what we budgeted. But because we used ESSER to support the budget, we had to take that expense off the appropriations and put it on the grant. So that's how it's reflected here.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. I don't believe we can hang on to money that we don't spend, or can we? So what happens, I know there's an E&D at the, I think at the region, or maybe that's here. What happens to that $56,000 it looks like was left on the table?
So you are correct. The E&D is in the region only. Whatever is left, the town,
And secondly, were there any ESSER funds, and if so, how much remaining in ESSER funds to apply to the 2025 fiscal year budget?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. It's around where we budgeted for 25 support. So I know I have no concerns on that. So what I would say is if we look back at the 25 budget and see what that amount was, it's right around there.
Okay, great.
But I don't know it off the top of my head.
That's fine. Deb?
I think it's $500,000. That's what's applied.
Right, but it was also a guess,
Yeah,
a little bit based on a guess of
Right.
how much would need to be spent
Okay.
last year. So you have a question now?
Yeah, I do. I like numbers to add up. I'm that kind of person. And I understand that there have been multiple budgets. The 25,933, $25,933,000 is what we've been seeing over the course of this year as these quarter reports come out. I'd just love to see a document that has that number as the budget, because on the town website, there's two other numbers for the general funds. One is 26,827,462 and another budget, another number is 26,017,095. So I'm just looking for resolution in my little nerdy brain that 25,933 is somewhere that I can find.
So for clarity, Deb, is your concern because you're saying that every quarter that this was presented, the 25,933 was consistent.
Yes.
So is the issue that you're seeking clarity from the district or is it from the town? Just to be clear.
Well, from the district, yeah. The town has a link to the budget that they approved with a statement that they said it was $26,827,462 with a note that said that the Amherst School Committee voted a total of $26,017,095 and specified other adjustments different from the linked document, and an updated document will be published when available. But I can't. I found the document that corresponds to what's on the town's website, but when I looked on our Google Drive, I couldn't find anything that.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
That you call Shannon.
I can do that.
Yes.
I'd love to.
Yes.
No.
No? No?
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting that.
Really?
And no, I say that because the protocol is actually you're supposed to call
Oh,
me,
okay.
Okay.
and then I connect you to Shannon.
Could
so,
she send an email with her question to you or something like
right?
that?
I was actually going to see if Shannon, because she was going to chime in, see if she can provide clarity.
If she knows. But
Right, and
yeah.
then yes, please send your questions so we could clarify. But
Thank
go
you.
ahead, Shannon.
So I would say I don't know off the top of my head. My first thought was I wonder if capital was included in those numbers that you have. If you could share that with me, and then I can provide feedback and clarity for why it is the way it is. But I do know that I confirmed with the town, and the town confirmed with me that there was 56,821 rolled in. So I have no thought that this is incorrect to that extent. So I just want to say that.
Thank you. Then the next question would be, could we get a reckoning that also includes the revolving funds? This is the general fund.
So what I would say to that is our end of year report has every source of funding that we have used.
Yes.
And it's all categorized. It's pretty in depth. I'm happy to share that with you.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Bridget?
Just two quick questions. I'm wondering, which of these overage trends did you foresee enough that they're projected into the fiscal year 25 budget? Or to what extent are we going to expect to see some of these same areas going over? That's my first question. My second one is just really, I think it was said, but I missed it. What was the total utility spend before the money was moved around?
The total utility spend before it was moved, I'd have to look up. I don't have that in front of me. In regards to 25 and tracking, we're gonna do a Q1 update in October, I presume, which will give us the beginning of an idea, but Q1 is always difficult because the first month and a half, the school hasn't started. And it's also going to be stranger this year because we did have ESSER funds that we were going to use by September 30th, which is going to impact this and make it look like we spent even less because of that. Um, so every year we review our expenses and all of the different buckets of money that we can apply, including like circuit breaker and IDA, and we make adjustments for sped depending on what we believe those costs are going to be. So it's our hope that we're on target, um, and we'll have to see how things shape out. There could be a student that comes in that does need a lot of extra support with special education, and sometimes those costs are not always predictable. So that's what I would like to know.
I do want to say that I think I do want to say that we could already project that our. Maybe mute her? I was saying I do want to say that we can already project that our special education costs is something that, in looking at our recent trends, is what our budget is increasing. And until we really work to rectify our staffing, our services, Shannon really pointed out something, and I know she talked about staff attendance and how that impacts, because when someone doesn't show up, we pay for a substitute. When they're on an extended leave, we're paying that individual and we're paying the individual who's coming in. And so there are different things that happen in a school year that we aren't really able to truly account for. But as we look at our trends and we start to budget out and we start to project, it is critical for us to look at those areas who over time has been consistently increasing. And I know special education up to today, I was telling that we spoke to the director around, what we can do, because that again is an increasing cost with services.
All right. Thank you very much, Shannon. Thanks for attending.
Shannon, you're on mute. Can you repeat?
Oh, I just said thank you, and Deb, please send me that follow-up so we can look into it together.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. All right. So the next item, I handbook review and possible vote. I don't think we can do that tonight. So
No, I did
okay.
not. Director Ortiz did request all of the handbooks. Our employee handbook is still at our attorney for review. And so we have not received that back, and I did not get all of the elementary handbooks in front of school. So it is my goal to have everything ready for at least our next meeting, to have the handbooks ready for review.
That'd be great. And of course, they're lengthy, so please send them out to us, even before the meeting is posted if they're available. So we have the time. Yeah. All right. Data chats. So just to tell the committee, I will be attending all three. I don't think anyone else was available. Bridget is going to one at the region. So, and I wonder if the superintendent would like just to tell the public what these data chats you have. Yeah.
Sure.
Is that mic on?
Okay. So in terms of instructional leadership, you have to understand and see where your school is, what's happening. And so we're engaging the school leaders in presenting their data for the beginning of the school year. analyzing and looking at, for example, the high school graduation rate. What are the trends that we're seeing? Looking at student achievement data, delving into what is our student attendance, and looking at trends to project out. Also looking at their school improvement plans and creating the goals around what is it that you kind of want to push your school and your school community towards. And then this is the beginning of the year. We'll have a middle of the year and an end of the year. So it's really, delving into what's happening at the school, taking ownership of that data, and, not just academic, but behavioral as well. Looking at the number of bullying reports and how those are addressed. So it's really a deep dive into what's happening at the school setting. There is a schedule change. So this week, we lost one of our beloved campus monitors at the region, Mr. Will Chapman. His homegoing service will be on Friday morning, this September 20th. So we will be rescheduling the high school, and I will send the updated schedule out after this meeting this evening. But it's an opportunity to engage with the schools around what are we seeing to develop the whole child.
Sounds wonderful. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if you have any update for us on the sixth grade move. We haven't talked about that since you've come on board, so maybe you have questions for us about what. Anyway, take it away. What would you like to tell us or hear from us?
I say this with a smile. So most recently, I was contacted through our DESI regional representative, and we had a very great meeting, and that was the first time that someone informed me of really sharing the information around what the plan was in terms of the sixth grade moving into the middle school, leasing space, and what the steps would have to be to move the sixth grade into it. I feel like since I've come on board, there's overarching things. It feels like umbrella topics, but there hasn't been any details and stems into what are the critical areas and projects and timelines. All of these projects, and I know Deb listed a host of them the last time, all of these projects take finances and it takes planning. I have not found an initial plan in terms of the sixth grade move. What I would want from the committee, and I'm going to ask this for all committees, is actually I need to know what the committee priorities are in terms of these projects, what was actually started. I think those are critical steps that were missed in my inception. And I know to me, I'm still in my entry, but that's one of the reasons the entry plan was pushed back, because honestly and truly, I feel like there are a lot of expectations. But I need us to be clear on where things are in the process. So I know I saw an email that was sent to the region around from a community stakeholder that shared the facilities plan and a study that was done in terms of the high school and the capacity of if the high school, the middle school, and the different areas of the region, with the plan for the new school to be K-5. And so I've also have a request in with IS looking at our projections in terms of over the last 5 years, what was our student population, and projecting out possibly 2 to 3 years, what our student population looks like. So we need to look at the fact that our current programming may not be able to be housed in a new school, and what would be the proper placing for our current programming. What would it take to fund the expansion of programs? Knowing that sixth grade does not sit within the regional agreement, what that would take, and the fact that that would also require approval from the commissioner, because any leasing of buildings would require the commissioner of education to approve the lease. So the final approval, I had a wonderful meeting with DESI. So those are steps that come into it. It is on my SBC meeting, my planning council, which is the directors and direct leads, to talk about our grade configurations, to meet with all of the directors and administrators and figure out who knows what and what piece. I also feel like a lot of things are segmented. So everyone doesn't have all of the information. And so it's very hard for me to get a full and complete picture in short spurts of time. Individuals were working in silos. So in terms of the sixth grade move, I know that the plan right now is for the new Fort River to be K5. Um, but we really have to look at essentially the current Fort River can't house sixth grade next year because they would need to have next year, not with the current building configuration. I invite you to walk Fort River with Principal Tammy. She would have to open next year an additional, I think third or fourth, sixth grade, and she doesn't have the spacing for that currently. So we really need to look at what we're doing with sixth grade, especially with Fort River, even if we're looking at shifting where sixth grade is. But I know the plan is for 2027 or was for 2027 to move sixth grade, school year 2026, school year 2026. So your request is what do I need from the committee? And I think I should email it to all the committees and say, I need clear understanding of where projects were, where they ended, where they stopped, without having to go back and watch every YouTube video, and also the expectation of priorities, knowing our fiscal budget as well as what it's going to take to truly move these programs forward. My goal is to continue to offer a great educational programming that makes us competitive and viable, but we need to do it realistically.
Is this mic on? Maybe, okay. I can give you information about what has been done around the sixth grade move over the last few years and what this committee did and schedule we received from the interim superintendent. I can email you all those things tomorrow. If you have not yet been provided with any information about the work that's been done, I'm very sorry to hear that. So, but I can send you a lot of information tomorrow and would be happy to tell you what I know anytime we can talk.
Thank you.
Deb.
I believe the town has set aside a certain amount of money for the sixth grade move.
I believe there was some talk of using ARPA money, but the deadline, we're too close to the deadline, and we would have had to have had like a bid ready to go or something. But that is, if you meet regularly with Paul, you can ask him if the town has any set aside, as Deb says, set aside money. That I remember that was discussed, but I feel like we've missed the boat.
It wasn't my talking point to meet with him because we were supposed to meet on Monday, but due to what occurred, we have postponed our meeting. I think the meeting is next week. It's next week, so it is on one of my talking points. Because, like I said, I met with the regional representative at DESI. She sent over our regional agreement. We do have follow-up meetings to discuss. One of the things that her concern was around the leasing of the space and how that will look between Amherst and the region. So that was the first time that I learned that, we were going to have to lease the space, and there are set parameters. So we've set up check-in meetings to start that discussion, not just around the sixth grade, but around our regional agreement as well, and just reviewing that. So there are different steps that have come in.
Bridget.
I just wanted to say that, and maybe this will help you, Sarah, when you're sending things tomorrow, but because it was one of the interim superintendent's goals for our school committee for last year to work on that a lot of documents are right there in the artifacts that the former superintendent sent to us. The other thing that I wanted to say is that it's not clear there, but there were a couple different versions of what it would look like in terms of the physical plan and layout to move the middle school to the sixth grade. and there was teacher input into one of the plans that involved the bathrooms and different things. And so I think it would be important to give a good look at them and to also just circle back to get the feedback from the middle school educators, because they were concerned with the latest version of the plan.
Yeah, there was a lot of work done on the program already. It seemed like, maybe Jennifer recalls, like it was almost ready to go. It seemed like as far as the educational plan, it had been very much worked out.
Yeah, there
And-
was
And then a halt was called for.
right, there was a like multifaceted team or group, including educators, that spent a summer, I don't remember how many summers ago now, working on a plan. I will try to dig that up for you, Dr. Z, or you could inquire of, I don't know.
The regional representative sent me a series of documents that she received around it. So, and that was the most recent copies that she had around the lease agreement and things like that. So we have another meeting coming up. And then Shannon and I met with her around the different parts of the agreement. And her inquiry was on the 6th grade move. So she sent me some documents that she had. And then, like I said, when I meet with my team tomorrow, I'll ask them about documents that they have. And then I'll go back to the artifacts. But I do think that as a school committee, being that my role is to execute the educational plan and implement, I do need there to be clarity on, so that I know when I'm presenting, that I'm giving you the full and accurate picture based on your expectations, but also that I know what the priorities are and I'm able to give you adequate information. So I do think that at some point we need to talk about what are, and I know I have my goals, but what are some standing things that they are. And so right now we can start with a 6th grade move and I can give adequate updates. Maybe there's a reason why it was halted and maybe that reason might be financial. Like I said, I found out when I met with her that the final approval of leasing of space comes through the commissioner. So, we would have to submit that timeline and the final lease and all of those things to DESI in a orderly fashion and time, because then the move won't even be able to take place. So there's a series of things that would need to come into the timeline. So I would really like to have a full, complete picture, and not just a 6th grade move, any other project or initiative outside of like the track and different things. That's regional,
region, yeah.
right? But for me, is there something else that was already started that there's like, we think this is going to happen, and I would like to not be in June hearing, hey, you were supposed to adopt social studies books. And I'm like, well, we're in the process of it, but there was an expectation for us, just giving that clarity of timeline and expectation.
Right. Well, the 6th grade move, because is one of them. I would say at some point, but this is less than, I don't think this committee needs to drive this so much. The planning for consolidating the Fort River and Wildwood schools, which last I heard, the intent is still to open in the fall or August of 2026. So obviously there's work to do there. I would say this committee for much of the year has been concerned about enrollments at the different elementary schools and whether in fact the students could all fit without either having to redistrict, or we would have to redistrict eventually because we're going from 2 schools to 1, but we wouldn't want to have to redistrict more than once, and that's always a matter of great concern to the public, so that isn't something we can just spring on people. So I have to say I'm alarmed to hear that you think Fort River cannot accommodate all its students. I think we were recently told by your predecessor that it would be crowded, but it can all fit. And so obviously that needs to be worked out. And I don't know if the decision about Caminante, what happens with Caminantes next year, enters into that, whether to offer a 6th grade.
It does.
Yeah.
Right now, one of the things And so again, in my one-on-one meetings with the principals, and again as we go through the process, um, it's going to be a critical part of the data chat as well, looking at student population and having that discussion. I have to say that Tammy knows her numbers, and so for me, one of the things that we've already seen is that the conflict in scheduling, Caminantes runs on one schedule versus Fort River, so it's actually like she's running a school within a school, and it causes a little bit of a scheduling conflict. There's also, that's an instructional thing that we need to analyze and look at, and see how we can either align the schedule so that it doesn't feel like there's two separate programs running under one principal. And then also looking at what we would need to do to make sure that if we are unable to move the sixth grade next year, that the sixth graders who are currently in Fort River can remain in Fort River. And so, again, that takes planning because, like you said, we have to inform parents. We have to talk about those things ahead of time. And to me, January is too late. So that's really why having these data-rich conversations earlier helps to start to build and plan out.
Committee members have any other projects or tasks to put on the list of things the superintendent needs to be paying attention to among the myriad other items? Jennifer.
Goodness gracious.
Microphone evening.
So I'm going to repeat something that Sarah said, which is about redistricting. I think my understanding is that we will need to redistrict when the new school opens, and that I feel like this is not widely known because we talk about the new school as replacing Wildwood and Fort River, but the fact is that some families currently at Wildwood and Fort River will not be districted to the new school just because of the number of students that the new school will be able to take. So I don't think that's something that's widely known. So like, as Sarah said, like it's an important thing to discuss, and the earlier we can discuss it, the better. And even though we can't necessarily do the redistricting now, we can at least start the conversation and maybe even like start doing some modeling about redistricting, like with our current population, and think about what that's going to look like in that year. So I think that's going to be important. The bathrooms seem to be a big topic of interest with sixth graders moving to the middle school. Which bathrooms will they use? Which bathrooms will seventh and eighth graders use? I don't know if this is like an Amherst School Committee issue or if it's a regional issue, but I've heard from educators at the middle school and parents. I don't fully understand all of the issues, but like it's a fraught issue. So just putting that on your radar that like we'll need to have a discussion and think about the bathroom situation.
So, in my mind, this evening, in terms of the possibility of redistricting, I knew when I started to think about what would have to happen, I knew redistricting is a possibility. I know moving of programming is a possibility. It's a strong possibility throughout the districts and even at the region. So I just didn't know that it was already set that it would have to happen. And that's why I'm saying that we really need to expand on it. And I'm hoping that I can get everything and expand on that. As we delve in, I think that the earlier that we can relay and go through the upset and the shock and awe and share information would be better. I'm kind of surprised that the bathrooms is a hot topic, and the reason being is because, one, most middle school models nationwide are 6-8. There are even models that are 5 through 8. And what you end up seeing is you really don't see a lot of grief or issues in terms of bathroom usage and stuff. So I really would like to see that feedback to see what the concerns are. I think that the idea was for sixth grade to be an academy within the middle school because it still would not be a part of the region, so it could not join the 6 to 8. So I'm guessing until I get to delve into the feedback and concerns, that would be it. But the bathrooms setting, I know we even have like 7-12 schools in Massachusetts, so I don't know, but I would really like to see the feedback on that to see what the driving concerns were.
Deb.
How many classrooms short is Fort River?
I'm not quite sure. Probably one or two, but I can get that number for you. Right now, Fort River runs 4 lunch periods. 4. And so and it's to the point where they have literally created spaces. If you go to Wildwood, which has the same layout as Fort River, you notice that Wildwood has 2 of their lunchroom spaces, but Fort River, I believe, only has 1 or partially of part, like 1.5. Because they have literally over time thrown up walls to create classrooms. So realistically, I and I applaud the work of facilities. I applaud the work of Principal Tammy, but I wouldn't want to think about where we would add another classroom at all in Fort River.
Any other topics to put on the priority list?
I just
Bridget.
wanted to just like in terms of process, we voted for a 6th grade academy to move in the fall of '26 to the middle school. So if we were going to do something different due to conditions on the ground, I just want to make sure that we're circling back as early as we can too, because, you know, that went out to the press and people were very much believing that's the plan we're working off of.
Right. All right. Thank you.
So I will definitely note and work on that and present something realistic and achievable based on our current conditions and what like I said, I found out in terms of what we have to abide by in terms of DESI guidelines to make that possible. So I may need some time, but we'll put that on the agenda.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I feel that the 6th grade agenda item has morphed into future agenda planning also. We do have to do warrants, but as long as we're talking kind of about agenda, is there anything that people want to add, either just this fall or sometime? Deb?
I'd like to talk about the BCG, the Budget Coordinating Group Subcommittee, the roles, responsibilities, and representatives.
Roles, responsibilities, and what?
Representatives, the
We are-
appointees. Yes.
Okay. All right. Then Jennifer, why don't you take it away with warrants, which are numerous, I
Okay.
believe.
So I have many warrants, because it's been a while since I read them. So all of these are going to include, I, Jennifer, shall authorize by my signature payables in the amount of, I'm not going to say that multiple times, $790,231.64 dated June 24th. Payroll in the amount of $282,217, also dated June 24th. And $2,811.38, also dated June 24th. And negative $1,128.96, dated June 24th. Moving on. Payables in the amount of $248,416.46 for the warrant dated June 21st. This includes general fund expenses of $159,354.28, revolving fund expenses of $10,242.94, grant fund expenses of $57,411.82, and capital fund expenses of $21,407.42. Payables in the amount of $315,599.58 for the warrant dated June 27th, 2024. This includes general fund expenses of $193,267.28, revolving fund expenses of $303,850.95, grant fund expenses of $91,783.19, and capital fund expenses of $26,698.16. Payables in the amount of $315,599.58 for the warrant dated June 27th. This includes revolving fund expenses of $193,267.28. Revolving fund expense, I think I just did that one, sorry, I'm repeating myself. Payroll in the amount of $673,809.67 dated July 10th. Payables in the amount of negative $202,460.56 dated June 10th. Payroll in the amount of $2,887.81 dated June 10th. Payables in the amount of $927,248.10 for the warrant dated June 28th, 2024. This includes general fund expenses of $847,729.67, revolving fund expenses of $140.72, grant fund expenses of $70,529.18, and capital fund expenses of $8,548.53, and gift fund expenses of $300. This is a revised warrant. Payables in the amount of $927,248.10 for the warrant dated June 28th, 2024. This includes general fund expenses of $147,729.67, revolving fund expenses of $140.72, grant fund expenses of $70,529.18, capital fund expenses of $8,548.53, and gift fund expenses of $300. Payroll in the amount of $724,068.66 dated July 24th. Payroll in the amount of $7,556.25 dated July 24th. Payables in the amount of $35,695.12 for the warrant dated July 26th. This includes general fund expenses of $16,404.76, grant fund expenses of $500, capital fund expenses of $8,491.36, and gift fund expenses of $299. Payroll in the amount of $682,304.99 dated August 7th. Payroll in the amount of negative $650 dated August 7th. Payroll in the amount of negative $592.99 dated July 24th. Payroll in the amount of $1,550 dated August 7th. Okay. Payroll in the amount of $638,117.49 dated August 21st. Payables in the amount of $186,877.60 for the warrant dated August 23rd. This includes general fund expenses of $177,424.48, gift fund expenses of $300, capital fund expenses of $8,550, and revolving fund expenses of $603.12. Payroll in the amount of $800,611.57 dated September 4th, 24. Wildwood Student Activities Transfer Request in the amount of $1,500 for the transfer dated September 3rd. Payroll in the amount of $4,540.01 dated September 4th. Payroll in the amount of $8,919.28 dated September 5th. Almost there. Payables in the amount of $95,455.31 for the warrant dated September 6th. This includes general fund expenses of $80,581.18, gift fund expenses of $352.32, capital fund expenses of $2,416.51, revolving fund expenses of $11,605.30, and grant fund expenses of $500. Two more. Payables in the amount of $61,914 for the warrant dated August 9th. This includes grant fund expenses of $53,724.16, grant fund expenses of $3,086.71, capital fund expenses of $5,013.05, revolving fund expenses of $15.08, and other funds $75 in petty cash. And the last one, payroll in the amount of, sorry, I'm missing commas, $830,679.15 dated September 18th. Thank you, I'm done.
That was a mouthful. Thank you. That concludes our business for the evening. So may I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, raise your hands. We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Amherst Media.